Good morning, adventurers. My name is Ben, and welcome to a morning show where I sit around, drink some tea, and talk about D&D. Okay, so first up for T&D today, I have my 1976 Father's mug on the other side here. Let me set this down and turn it around because it's very full right now. It's a little bit. It's this boy skiing with his dad in the background. It's odd, but a bunch of members of my D&D party gave it to me, so I think it's a lot of fun, and it's just one of those things that I have that you're kind of like, why would you own that? But this is what I do. So inside of that we have some Raspberry Royale black tea from Bigelow. It is somehow both kind of like light and fresh and whatever, and at the same time kind of heavy and dark because it's black tea. So it's actually really nice for a spring morning where it's kind of like outside, but you know that it's going to end up being pretty nice out because it is supposed to be pretty nice today, here at least. So with all of that, let's dive into what it is that we are talking about today. So first up, let's do a quick run back of what we talked about yesterday because it is a continuation of that. We were talking about the strongest subclass, in my opinion, from each of the different classes. I went through and I did a lot of different readings and refreshers on everything. I kind of compared stuff to each other, and I ended up with this list. It might not be the same as your list. These are just the ones that I think are the most powerful. So let's go ahead and get into it. Recapping what we talked about yesterday, we have the Armorer Artificer as our top armorer, or as our top artificer. There we go. We have the Totem Warrior Barbarian. We have the Lore Bard and the Eloquence Bard tied up top. We have the Twilight Cleric, we have the Moon Druid, we have the Battlemaster Fighter, and the Eldritch Knight Fighter tied, and we have the Ascendant Dragon Monk. That takes us through the first 7 of the 13 official classes, and I'm tacking on Bloodhunter at the very, very bottom here, just because we can. Why not? Why not? Right? Why not? So, getting into it for what we are talking about with Paladins today. We have, to I'm sure pretty much no one's surprise, the Vengeance Paladin taking that top slot with the Paladin subclasses. Now, as I mentioned in my original video, not yesterday's, but the one from last week talking about my favorites, Paladins are kind of meh to me. I've never played one. I do think I need to play one. I think that it will change my opinion on them, but for now, Paladins are just kind of like, to me. So I am not overly impressed by a lot of their subclass features. However, the Oath of Vengeance Paladin, in terms of combat prowess, I will say, is hands down the best one, I think. The Vow of Enmity that you get as part of your Channel Divinity is beyond amazing. You get advantage on attacks against a creature that you choose, and then you can just wail on them. That's crazy good. That amps up the number or the ability that you might have to get divine smites in, which obviously Paladins, you're going to want to dump a bunch of smite in there. It amps up your ability to deal those divine smites, and it amps up your ability to deal those divine smites on critical hits specifically. That's the important one there. In addition to that, ultimately they end up with a fly speed. It is their level 20 feature, so you're probably pretty much never going to see it, but still pretty dang good. And Relentless Avenger is actually really, really, really good. They really sort of went for it on that one, essentially, I guess, because it is a really good control effect that you can have where you hit somebody with an opportunity attack and then you can move immediately and put yourself back in their path, so you can redirect them in the way that you want to if you strategically place yourself using that feature, which is really, really phenomenal. So Oath of Vengeance Paladin, gonna be my top slot for Paladins. Moving on to Rangers, this one will come as a surprise to nobody, I'm sure. Honestly, a lot of these probably not super surprising, but surprise to no one, I'm sure. It's the Gloom Stalker Ranger. It is head and shoulders above a lot of the other ones in terms of combat power. The amount of features that you get at level 3 that are beyond good, honestly, are crazy. And the fact that you shortly, actually very quickly, become invisible while you're in darkness without having to cast invisibility or concentrate on invisibility, and by darkness I do mean dim light, not even just like straight up darkness. And then you don't become uninvisible as long as you can continue to hide and stuff like that. It's so good. The fact that you get a third attack on your attack action starting at level 5, obviously, but a second starting at level 3 with your first round of combat with Dread Ambusher, so good. There's a reason that people will dip 3 levels into Ranger just to get Gloom Stalker, and that is one of them, because Gloom Stalker is just phenomenal. It's the best one. It's the best one. It honestly, I wish that Horizon Walker was the best one, because Horizon Walker is my favorite Ranger subclass, but you gotta give it up to the Gloom Stalker. I have made a ton of NPCs that are based in some of the Gloom Stalker features because it is so good, and because it will give them just a little bit more in their arsenal, essentially. So I adore the Gloom Stalker as well as the Horizon Walker, but Gloom Stalker definitely takes the cake for being the most combat combat forward, best at combat, best at fight. So moving on from the Gloom Stalker to the Rogue. This one, if you know me, probably won't surprise you, but if you are expecting a more traditional answer, you might be surprised. I guess I don't know exactly what everybody thinks about what the most powerful rogue is. I obviously, as mentioned last week, love the Phantom, that's what it's called, and the Swashbuckler rogues. Those two are my favorites. However, I've said it before, I'll say it again, versatility is really what sort of takes the cake for being good, being the best, which means that similar to the Eldritch Knight, we are going with the Arcane Trickster rogue, because it's just hard to argue with getting that kind of magic. Getting some magic turns your rogue, who is typically good at, like 4 things, into being good at everything, or having the potential to be good at everything. Because the rogue, given that they can pick from the wizard spell list, can pick stuff that is specifically going to augment their best features, as well as fill some of those gaps. The same goes for that Eldritch Knight fighter, but even more so for the rogue, I think. The rogue, if you lean into the Arcane Trickster bit, it is going to be able to be one of the most disorienting, the most... it will synthesize with itself better than most other things will be able to do. Because obviously, it's built to synthesize with itself normally, but when you get to build magic into it as well, via your choice, for a predominantly martial class that doesn't deal in magic really at all, except for this, it's going to be the best. It's going to be so good. And when I say disorienting a little bit ago, I mean, you can pick spells that will like disorient enemies and stuff like that in order to give yourself that sneak attack on pretty much every single turn. If you don't agree with that, I implore you to take a look at some of the wizard spells that you can pick up as a rogue, because they're so good. They're so good. They really just are. So definitely take a look at that. Reassess if you think that I'm wrong. But if you think I'm wrong, let me know, because, I mean, why not? Moving on to the Sorcerer. This one was actually a little tough for me, I will say. However, and I don't think it's just because I'm playing one right now, the Divine Soul Sorcerer takes the cake for me. And here is why. Sorcerers as a whole, I really, really like. I think they're really good. I think they are actually kind of underrated, because I think that so many people look at it and go, oh man, you only get, 12 spells? Why would you ever want to do that? But they are very good at what they do. The thing about that is, you add the entire cleric spell list to your selection. The whole cleric spell list. That is, cleric spells, in my mind, are some of the absolute best in the game. They just are. They are phenomenal. The ability to heal, buff, debuff, and control the battlefield in that cleric spell list is unmatched in any other spell list. And I think that the Divine Soul Sorcerer, given that you can add that in there, is just going to be better. It's just going to be better, honestly, than a lot of your other sorcerers that you can have there. Plus, you gain extra healing ability if you are playing healing in some capacity. You can reroll healing dice. You eventually get the ability to fly. Obviously, that is... I mean, I love flying, clearly. I've said it several times on a bunch of these different ones. And you have the ability to just heal yourself eventually, just as a bonus action, just like give yourself a bunch of health back, which is phenomenal. And then favored by the gods at first level, if you miss an attack or fail a saving throw, you can roll 2d4 and add it to it. That's really good. That is a potential addition of 8, but a minimum of 2. That's almost, I will say almost, better than Bardic Inspiration at low levels. I wouldn't say it necessarily is, but it is almost, in my mind, at least. Plus, just the Cleric spell list. The Cleric spell list. I cannot emphasize that enough. Hopefully you guys agree with me on that, because if you don't, then this is a really awkward segment for you. I can't see your reaction, so hopefully you do agree with that. Moving on to the Warlock. This one is easy. This one is cake. The Hex Blade Warlock is the best Warlock. That's kind of the end of the statement there. The Hex Blade Warlock is... It allows you to be one of the most versatile Warlocks you can be, simply by nature of the fact that it also focuses on martial combat in addition to being a spellcasting class. And that's just kind of it. And when you're fighting one boss enemy, Hexblade's Curse is a crippling thing for that enemy, because you critting on a 19 or a 20 plus getting hit points plus getting extra damage, all of those things, it makes it period. That's the end of the sentence on that one. It makes it. The Hexblade Warlock is kind of head and shoulders above most of the rest of the Warlocks, which kind of sucks. I wish that there were more Warlock subclasses that could compete with that power level, but there just aren't in official published material, and that's kind of where we're at with it right now. But the Hexblade Warlock, not even it's head and shoulders above the rest of it, honestly. Which brings us down to the Wizard. Now, the Wizard was a little bit difficult for me because there are so many Wizard subclasses, and honestly, so many of them fall into the exact same category of being fine, because the Wizard suffers from a similar problem as the Paladin, in my mind, which is that the base class is not... It's built enough to be its own thing. It doesn't need subclasses to augment it. That being said, there are a few Wizard subclasses that really sort of stick out head and shoulders above the other ones to me. To me, I obviously like the Order of Scribes. I talked about it last time, but I think that the Chronergy Wizard and the Divination Wizard are the two best Wizard subclasses. Specifically because both of them have the ability to affect dice rolls. Specifically D20 dice rolls. That feature cannot be overstated enough. The fact that you have the ability to quite literally change the way that a D20 is going to roll in-game is absurdly powerful, and I don't think enough people quite realize that. If you are playing a Divination Wizard and the enemy gets a critical hit against your cleric that has very little health left, you can go, actually, that's a 3 if you rolled a 3 for one of your portents. And then the attack can just miss. Just straight up miss. You have turned the critical hit into a total miss. That is absurd. Like, that, the amount of power that brings to a player is crazy, and I don't think that it gets talked about enough, because we don't see enough Divination Wizards played in live streams and stuff like that. There is Adine, Abernathy from Dimension 20, Divination Wizard, and Siobhan does a phenomenal job with that. But that's most of it. Otherwise, you have a bunch of evocation like blasty guys, which is fine, but not really my cup of tea. And then the Chronergy Wizard has a very similar feature. It allows you to affect D20 rolls. So Chronergy and Divination are just going to be the best. They're going to be the best, and I don't really know what else to tell you with that one. Which brings us to the bottom of the list. Finally, we have our bloodhunter. This is obviously not an official published class, but I wanted to make these videos even, so there are 7 in each of them. And for the bloodhunter, again, not that many official published subclasses, because, well, there are no official published subclasses, but there are only 4 subclasses that go with it. And I do think that each of them have their own kind of benefits to them, but in my mind, the Ghost Slayer is the most proficient combatant among them, just by nature of being able to beat the snot out of people. You get extra Crimson Rite features with the Ghost Slayer, which is kind of the bread and butter of the bloodhunter. A lot of people might be thinking, why wouldn't you pick Profane Soul? You just talked about how good it is to be able to spellcast and do this. The ability to just, like, beat the crap out of people from the Ghost Slayer, in my mind, sort of supersedes that just a little bit. In addition to that, you can, you have the ability to, like, phase in and out of stuff as Ghost Slayer, starting at level 7, and then you get another brand and stuff like that. It is pretty much the only martial class that has a spellcasting optional subclass in it. That I didn't pick the spellcasting optional subclass in it because you just have the ability to beat the crap out of people and help control the battlefield as a Ghost Slayer. So in my mind, Ghost Slayer, top of that list. But that brings us to the end of all of our subclasses. Thank you guys so much for tuning into that whole thing. Moving on to what we have next, we have today shows that are happening. Very exciting. I love shows. I'm excited because Tuesdays are usually my catch-up days, but I am mostly caught up right now, which means that I'm going to continue to plow through some of my backlog that I have given myself because I've decided to start a bunch of other D&D shows at the same time. But the shows that are coming out today are not necessarily in any order here. Diary of a Dragon Pit, Star Wars First Resistance, again, they're using the SW5E rules, so that's why they're on here. Dungeons and Daddies, Bombarded, Heck of a D&D, Glass Cannon, and The Queer Casters. So, definitely go check out some of those people. Let them know that I sent you. I really would appreciate that. Maybe we'll get somebody to be like, hey, you sent people to watch my show. Thank you at some point here, because that would be a lot of fun. I think. I don't know. Well, probably. Anyway, that is everything I had to talk to you guys about today. Thank you so much for making me part of your morning routine. I really do appreciate it. And thank you so much in particular to my patrons. You guys are the ones that make this show possible. If you're interested in becoming a patron, there's a link to that in the description of this episode. If you are one of my patrons, don't forget, voting ends on tomorrow, on Wednesday. So go ahead and check that out. See what you help vote and decide what you want to see as part of this show, because I am obviously looking for your suggestions, looking for your input, because I want to make this show something that you guys actually want to... you get to see what you want to see. That's what I'm trying to say. But that is everything that I have to talk to you guys about. So with all that said, don't forget, drink tea, play D&D, and keep on rolling.